I ultimately am not super impressed with this North Carolina team. I think they have a lot of talent, particularly with the guards, but I don't think they're a great cohesive unit.
Back and better than ever. Starting 502 podcast, brought to you as always by Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon, live from the Kearns Corner Studios. Pres Meyer, Jake Hook on the other end. Jake, we are smack in the middle of the holidays. How's it going?
We're good. I finally stopped traveling and get to exist in my home for like more than 3 days at a time. So that's pretty
That's
nice.
nice, right? Sleep in your own
Mm-hmm.
bed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Jake,
Do you
when are
try?
we getting married officially? When's the official date?
October 4th, 2025.
October 4th. That's right, baby. So 8
Mm-hmm.
4 25. It's easier to remember, I think.
10-4, 10-4.
That's right. Okay. That
There,
was the thing.
yeah.
That was the thing. Yeah, we talked about this before. Jake, I mean, dude, besides being an engaged man, I think that you're at least semi happy because Louisville won a basketball game. I don't know.
Yes. Oh, God. I felt good at halftime, and then EKU didn't miss a shot for what felt like 8 minutes. And then we came back, went on like a 15-2 run, and I was like, all right, we're good. We got 8 minutes left to go. We're good. And then we just decided to turn the ball over on like 5 straight possessions, and EKU went back to not missing a shot. And then thankfully Noah Waterman saved the damn day, because I think that would have caused a bit of a crisis in coordination if we went back to losing to inferior local in-state teams like we did with
Yeah.
Kenny Payne.
Yeah. The fact that it's Eastern Kentucky would really rub the salt in the wound there. Eastern Kentucky, 208th in Ken Palm. Jake, not the best, but like we said the last time that we spoke to the listener, better than the experts think. Like they played some quality opponents to other ACC opponents very closely until kind of the latter parts of the game. Louisville suffered a little bit of attrition as far as issues with Chucky Hepburn being injured. Their back was kind of up against the wall a little bit on the back half of that game as well. Ultimately able to pull it out. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. I think the fact that you pulled out a win when the last 3 years you would not have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that tells you a lot about this team. Uh, Down the stretch, like so, Louisville goes down one with a minute left. Did you think that they'd pull it out?
Uh, no, based on the last 3 years of watching, not that that's Pat Kelsey's fault at all, but I think at this point my mindset has just become so negative, especially when watching these close games, that we were going to somehow figure out how to blow it or lose it. So I was very happy to be proven wrong, and it felt like at that point EKU had most, if not all, of the momentum coming back down from 8-9-0 the last 5-6 minutes of the game. So yeah, it was a happy surprise for sure.
I did think it was weird that Pat Kelsey kept putting the ball in Chucky Hepburn's hands down the stretch. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but because of his injury, he clearly was not, playing at his normal level, right? Am I kind of, giving him too much of a pass here?
I didn't notice the injury as much. I know that they said something on the broadcast about an injury whenever he came out. I just thought he was out because he got a third foul, but I guess it turned out he was injured. I still wasn't sure what it was. The thing that stood out to
Yeah.
me, he struggled to finish in the
Well, I was
paint,
going
and
to
then he had
say
6 turnovers.
yes, yeah. So he definitely got poked in the eye,
Oh yeah,
100%.
the eye.
Now,
Duh, yeah, I knew that. Never mind.
yeah, he got poked in the eye, looked uncomfortable. Um, After that, he kind of tried to run the show a little bit and then had to come out of the game. So it was kind of like a weird situation, and we didn't really, we don't really. I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it, but it just sounds. I mean, it's got to be jarring when you get poked in the eye when you have, that sort of impact on your motor coordination, if you will. Even the one basket that Hepburn made after the whatever type of injury or mix up there was, he didn't look like himself. Like he kind of like weirdly squared up to the basket in midair. I don't know. This sounds very nitpicky, but he just didn't look like his normal fluid self. And maybe I'm looking too much into that, but that's definitely to me was at least part of the reason why Louisville was able to creep back in because Chucky wasn't hitting the shots he normally hit. He wasn't making the plays he normally make. And as you alluded to, 6 turnovers is very, very uncharacteristic.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, how did they not call anything on that when he got hit in the eye? They just called it off on Chucky, just called the ball
Yep.
out on Chucky, and EKU just got the ball back. And I was like, how do we not review that? Because that's incidental contact to the head and neck area. I thought I was like, it wasn't intentional, obviously, but I guess if they don't deem it a flagrant one, then they can't go revert that call. But that was
Right.
very odd.
I mean, if
Also,
nobody saw anything, yeah.
where did Terrence Edwards go in the second half? First half, I was tweeting about him. He looked so smooth, knocking down threes, smooth in transition. I think he had 19 points in the first half. I might be wrong there. And then he had
17 points in the
17,
first half.
17 points. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So he had that one free throw at the end of the game, and then he had one more basket, and that's it. Where
That's it.
where in the world did he go? Like I was so lost by that. He looked so good. I was so confident in him.
I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did because what we saw in the first half was like, okay, Terrence Edwards is just he's gonna take over this game. Nobody can check him. Nobody can match him. I mean, it's true. The first half, I mean, he absolutely was the reason why Louisville took such a substantial lead in the first half. I think they went up by 15 at one point until kind of the closing, moments of the first half. They were up significantly. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a huge reason behind that. But I mean, I think he kind of started to catch his stride against some better opponents, and then you take maybe a bit of a step down against EKU, and he's even more locked in, if you will, and really kind of realizing what his role is on this team and how much he can, others can help him create, and get him open looks. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the situation was there, but yeah, that was really disappointing. And I mean, obviously, a huge reason why EKU just kind of slid back into the game and ultimately took the lead there for a little bit.
Yeah, looking back at the individual performances, I guess
Mhm.
we Noah Waterman played well and Javon Hadley played well. Chucky didn't do a whole lot in the second half. Terrence Edwards really didn't do a whole lot in the second half. Like
No,
we were very, very lucky to escape that one with a win. And also, can we just talk about EKU just not missing a shot? Devontae Blanton and George Kimball III, just like obviously they missed shots, but like just hitting NBA level difficulty shots, possession after possession after possession. Felt like I was taking crazy pills. I was like, that's a bad shot. Give it up. And it's just wet, wet, wet. I'm like, fuck.
yeah, yeah, dude, I I don't know. I just so I'm just looking back at their stats. EKU did have that. Basically, they had a 9-0 run that really brought them back into things. But yeah, I mean, you're right as far as the amount of shots that they hit. I mean, we talked about this just very briefly last week going into the game. They do have some high level shooters on their team. Just going very quickly through, their statistics here. So on the season, um, Turner Buttrey is a 44% shooter from 3-point range.
That's the
George
white kid.
Kimball was, yes, George Kimball, 34.6%. Jordan Crawford, 34%. A lot of really solid play across the board. Um, I, I don't know, man. I think that they just hit a lot of tough shots. It was just one of those games. In the first half, Louisville hit a bunch of threes. Second
Mm-hmm.
half, they hit two, right? Two threes
Yeah,
in
I
the
think it
second
was
half.
two. Yep.
Um, in EKU couldn't miss. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
we said, they had a 9-0 run, but really they had a run that basically took them from a 9-point first half deficit to, you know, basically neck and neck for a good portion of the second half. And me and my wife are sitting there watching the game. We're like, it's at some point they're gonna pull away. Like this feels like,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't feel like a team that feels like a team that's gonna, be punching up at you a lot, but ultimately you're able to kind of adjust to that and kind of cruise to like a 10 to 12 point win. And that's just not what happened. I don't, you know, I, I really can't put my finger on what it was. But if I had to, if there's a good place to start, Jake, and this is probably, a good next spot here is the defense, man. Um, the defense has taken a significant step down, a step
Mm-hmm.
back in the last few weeks. when we ended our last podcast, we were up to 48th in Ken Palm. Louisville, as we sit here recording today, is at 60th in Ken Palm, and that is 100% due to the defense. The offensive stats continue to improve, and defensively, they've just fallen off a cliff. I mean, any thoughts on? I mean, obviously the attrition to the roster has played a role in that for sure. But thoughts on what's played into that the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the loss of Case and Pryor. I did a deep dive before this, just kind of looking at how has this team fared statistically without Case and Pryor? Because in my eyes, I'm seeing that we don't look as good on offense and we definitely don't look as good on defense. But I was just curious, am I just making it up? Am I just like trying to make up excuses for this team? But like, no, like without Case and Pryor, we are a significantly worse team, particularly on the defensive end. So I broke down the stats. With Case and Pryor, first 7 games. So that's Moorhead, Tennessee, Bellarmine, Winthrop, IU, West Virginia, Oklahoma. We're forcing nearly 18 turnovers a game. In the 6 games without him, it's down to 10. With Case and Pryor, we're averaging 4 blocks a game. Without him, we're down to 1.3. Our opponents are now shooting 40% from 3 in the 6 games without him. They were shooting 33%. And then from 2, our opponents are now shooting 58%, where they were shooting 44%. So, I mean, just huge statistical differences when it comes to being able to force turnovers, stop them from even getting a chance to score. And they're shooting 14% better from 2, 7% better from 3. And it's just, I mean, it's evident that we're just not nearly as effective of a defensive team as we thought we were whenever we had Kaysen.
I mean, maybe there's some thought to without the depth on this roster, or the depth that that's available to put into the lineup. Maybe the thought from the coaching staff is let's do whatever needs to be done to get better offensively. That way we can. I don't know. Is there some thought that you give to that? Like they want to continue playing their style, and in order to play their style, they're going to have to make sacrifices on the defensive end. I mean, is there something to be said to that, or are we just kind of throwing shit against the wall and
It could be it. I just really think that you're just missing a really unique defensive player. Like the things that Kaysen was able to do, defend on the perimeter, hedge so well on screens, occasionally just run through a on-ball screen and just get a steal for an easy dunk, to rebound, to somewhat be able to defend on the interior. Like those are just things that none of his replacements can do in any facet of the game as well as he was doing on the defensive end. So I think maybe there's a little bit less aggression just because we're now running the 7, maybe 8-man rotation now that we have Kadir back. You don't want to get as much foul trouble. You don't want to wear your guys out as much because now they're playing 34 minutes instead of 28, 27. So I think there could be some truth to that, but I just really think it's the fact that you're missing an elite defensive player. And I know before the season, the numbers backed it up. Kaysen Pryor is a great college defender.
yeah. Did a Abubakar Traore even play in the second half? I'm looking back at it. I remember looking at the halftime box score. I don't think Traore came in the second half.
I
I could
don't
probably
believe he did. He,
break it
he,
down here really fast. Let's see.
he
Second
only,
half.
yeah, he only played 5
All
minutes
right.
total.
Yeah, he did not get in the game in the second half. So something to watch out for. That apparently Kelsey said before the game that he was planning on getting Traore about 10 minutes. I think those plans probably went off the rails a little bit when all of a sudden they went from being up 15 to down 2. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and especially because Traore he didn't play especially well in any facet. Like it seemed like he needs to still work on getting up to game speed. Not a conditioning thing, more of just an instincts and reflexes thing, right? Um, which is a little disappointing in a sense, right? Like, did they rush him back too quickly, or he just clearly wasn't himself. So that's something to watch as we go into North Carolina. We'll dive into that in a second, but I guess from your perspective, do you think that teams are starting to catch on more to what Louisville's identity is, and they've kind of found a secret recipe to success against this team?
No, I don't really think so because I think we're still getting high quality looks. So on the offensive end, I mean, I just truly think that every game, almost every game, except for like Tennessee, that was not good at all, or Ole Miss, like
Mhm.
it just comes down to, do we hit threes? Like, do we
Yeah.
hit the open shots that we create? Like, that's all it is. So I really don't think that there's a recipe or some secret sauce to defend or stop this Louisville team. We're getting open looks every time. It's just, is Noah Waterman 3 for 6 on the day, or is he 1 for 8?
Right.
Is Javon Hadley 1 for 5, or is he 3 for 5? Like, it's just
Yeah. I
truly.
mean,
I think that's what the thing is. So no, I don't really think that teams have figured us out in any way. I think maybe on the defensive end, they're realizing that they can probably be more aggressive because we don't want to foul and we don't really have an interior shot blocker. Like I said, we're averaging
right.
1.4 blocks per game without Case and Pryor in a lineup. So I think maybe on defense, there's definitely something that can be found there. But offensively, no, it's on us to make open jump shots.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's to me, it feels pretty obvious that there's kind of something that coaches are adjusting to a little bit on the when they are on the offensive end and Louisville is playing defense. I think that, and I think that Louisville kind of has to play into that a little bit, right? Like, and until you can get Kadir Traore playing 15, 20 minutes a game, that's kind of the sacrifice you have to make. I think that teams are starting to notice that they can kind of take it to James Scott. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
this big time shot blocker a season ago. And it seems like in some ways James Scott's almost taken a step back. He's almost he's just in the middle of the sophomore slump. I know that's been a thing in the past that we've talked about with certain players, uh, but you know I just you got to see more from him, right? Like I think if you're pointing to one player on this team where you have to see more, it's got to be James Scott. I mean,
Yeah, I
obviously, it's nice when he gets the ball on the post and he scores almost every time, but he's getting the ball on the post maybe 2 times a game, maybe 3 times a game. Like you got to see more outside of that.
Yeah, after watching a few of his games last year at Charleston, I mean, you saw a guy that needed a lot of work on his offensive game, but you saw a toolsy guy, a guy that had so much potential, and you thought, okay, another year in Pat Kelsey's system, he'll be even better offensively, and he looks the same, like maybe less aggressive, honestly, than he was in his freshman season at Charleston. So I'm definitely disappointed. This team needs more scores. Like, we have Chucky and we have Terrence. Consistently, we know that they're likely going to get us combined 30, 35 points a night. But where are the other 40 points going to come from? 10 from Rain, maybe 10 from Noah Waterman, maybe 2 from Noah Waterman, 8 from Javon Hadley. Like, we need more guys
Mhm.
to be able to score the basketball. And James Scott has not at all taken it upon himself. I think he had one opportunity against EKU in the post to back down a dude, take a shot, and he didn't take it. He kicked it out. So if he's not catching a lob, if he's not getting an offensive rebound and putting it right back up, he's passing that ball, or he's
I
not
mean,
interested in it.
maybe this is just not the staff's philosophy, but to me, I think you add another dimension to this team if he can be a guy who can get it back to the basket and be a scoring threat. Because then when he passes it with a purpose, that just adds more to the offensive end, right? And defensively, clearly teams are learning that they can take it to him. But he's like Javon Hadley is your center on offense right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Javon Hadley's 5'6", 6'6" on on a good day,
He's the only dude
and
backing a man down.
that's your big man. And so, I mean, that shows you, as we're kind of talking through this, it shows you that they have a willingness to have a post game. It's just
I
that
mean,
it's not
they
through James Scott.
they had Ante. I don't know how to say his last name. Brazovic, the big white dude who's still at Charleston now, killing it. They had him. So I mean, like, if the player has the skills and the trust within the offensive system to be a back to the basket player, they will allow him to be a high post or a low post player. And clearly James Scott is just not there yet. He's not developed that part of his game. I wish that he would try. He shot a three a couple games ago, which was at least something to see. It didn't go in, but I was
Yeah,
happy to at least see him shoot a basketball that wasn't a dunk. So that was nice. I did want to go back to Kadir Traore.
yeah,
5 minutes
yeah,
played, 0 for 2. Pretty sure the first time he touched the ball, traveled. Gave
yeah.
up an and one right after that. Fouled 3 times in 5 minutes. I mean, he did just look out of sorts. I will give him grace though. I mean, he's coming back from an injury. We saw it took Terrence Edwards about 7, 8 games to really get acclimated to the
Hmm.
system, and that's Kadir's like 1.5 game, like not even his full second game. Or I guess, yeah,
Right.
because he played two
No.
before that. So
Mhm.
it's barely even his second game. He played 5 minutes in this game. So I'd look to see more from him. Probably not against North Carolina, but as we move on 2-3 weeks, a month down the schedule, I feel like we should be getting a solid stat line: 5-6 points, 4-5 rebounds, 2-3 assists from Traore. At least that's what I'm
Mhm.
hoping, because the team certainly needs it.
If you could look at this team right now and just add one dimension to this team that, if they do X, uh, compounded with everything that they're doing right now, if you could do X, you're a tournament team.
Add a player or just add a dimension to this team?
A dimension to the team. So something, a skill set that they probably possess, but you haven't seen it consistently enough.
I mean, it's knocking down threes for sure. I think that's something that we can do. Something that I don't think we do currently possess, but would be a huge help, would be a post presence, like we just talked about, like a
Yeah.
guy that can get in the basket, can get a double team, or can just score one on one, get an easy bucket, be a Shane Bohannon, be a Gorky Zhang, be somebody that you can go to 4 or 5 times in the game, one dribble, two dribble, fake right, left hook, like whatever it is. Like I think that's something that would be huge for this team. And I'm kind of surprised. I guess it's just not in Noah Waterman's game either. I definitely don't think it's in Frank's game. But I thought for sure that we would look for some other outlets when it came to scoring. And it kind of just seems like we're doing the same thing offensively, except for just putting more weight on Chucky and more weight on Terrence, as opposed to
Mhm.
looking to score in other ways, which is a little frustrating. But I know that Pat Kelsey is doing what is best for this team. But I do think that if we could get a post presence, that would be ginormous, or just more consistent shooting. I would take either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just creativity in general to make this offense run through the post a little bit more. I think that could be huge. I think that's where you're, kind of missing, that extra big man that we thought that we may have in Ali Khalifa.
Hmm.
I mean, imagine having Ali Khalifa in the middle,
Yes.
with James Scott sparing him instead of James Scott in the middle with Noah Waterman or, Anselm eBay sparing him. I mean, that's
Hmm.
all the difference in the world right there. Very quickly, player of the game against Eastern Kentucky. Who you got?
Oh goodness gracious! I mean, it's got to go to Noah Waterman. I mean, I don't think he played the most complete game, certainly.
Mm-mm. No,
But
no.
I mean, at the end of the day, he gets that ball, reigns out of control, lucky to get it to him, and he, in that moment in that left corner, looks like he's about to shoot a three, like a contested corner three for like a half a second, and I was
Mhm.
about to pull my pubes out. Like I was like, "Oh my god, please don't fucking shoot another three." And thankfully, he pulled back that right dribble, then crossed, took baseline, and finished it. So I mean, I think it's got to go to Noah, and he didn't play a terrible game. He scored 12 points, shot a little under 50% from the field, was not great on defense, hit a couple threes. But I mean, it's got to go to him, because without that play, this is a completely different conversation. This isn't a learning point. This isn't, oh, this team is growing. This is, oh my God, are we going to win 5 more games this year? Like, so I think it's got to go to
Right.
Noah Waterman.
Right. And I mean, I think that it's fair to assess this as if this team lost this game, right? Like,
Hmm.
say you're sitting here and you're 7-6 instead of 8-5. What do you feel differently about this team all of a sudden?
If with losing to Eastern Kentucky, absolutely. Yes. Record wise,
Yeah.
no, but from losing to Eastern Kentucky, yes, absolutely. The floor to this team, I think, I would imagine losing to Eastern Kentucky was never in my thoughts with this coaching staff, with the talent that we have. So yeah, I think that the floor that I thought this team had would have dropped significantly had we have ended up taking an L.
Definitely. I mean, that's I mean that's coaching. Like that's coaching in a nutshell, right? Is like, Bettina used to say that all the time. Like, when the team hits their shots, I'm the best coach in the world, but
Hmm.
when the shots aren't falling and you turn the ball over a couple more times than normal, then all of a sudden I'm a terrible coach and everything's awful and you know things are not going the way that they're supposed to be going and yada yada yada. I think that you know as the season goes on, that could be a turning point in the season
Hmm.
where you are finally learning through winning, right? Like you had to learn in a lot of losses over the last few years.
Yeah, I'm sick
and
of learning through losses.
you're finally learning through win, which I think is huge. Play of the game obviously is Noah Waterman.
Hmm.
Um, that was a very difficult shot. Like we've seen it from 15 different views at this point. That was a very difficult shot. Like,
Oh yeah,
I don't know, would you make that shot?
absolutely not. I cook it with no one in front of me, let alone with two. Yeah, I mean, he had the one dude trying to take a charge, kind of slid out of the way. One dude behind him, all his momentum is going right, and he's having to finish it left. He hit it off the backboard, it hit off the front rim, and then it went
Hmm.
in. So I mean, it was a tough bucket. I'm happy that Noah was able to make it. Maybe that
A
strikes a little bit more
difficult
confidence
angle.
in him. Hmm.
Like when he first went up, I was like, for sure that was a miss, and it
Hmm.
like just snuck over the side of the rim. Like it
Yeah.
was kind of like a straight. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe, but I mean, yeah, it could be ultimately the bank that saves the momentum of the season, right? Like
Oh
you
yeah.
still don't have any bad losses by any stretch of the imagination.
Hmm.
Um, you know, for me, I think the player of the game is probably either Chucky or Fadigan. To be
Hmm.
honest with you, just because of uh, you know how I would say be Chucky because he had the more complete game, right? Like the first and second half, yeah, he had 6 turnovers, but ultimately, seven rebounds or 7 assists, 6 rebounds.
Hmm.
Um, you know, again, just an absolute stat stuffer. I mean, my man had 13, 7, 6, and 6. Like,
Hmm.
I know 6 turnovers isn't great, but like, good stuff. I mean, there's not enough praise that you can heap upon this guy at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of his worst games of the season, and he's still
and
best
he
player on the
still
court.
had 13, 7, and 6. Right.
Hmm.
What more can you say there?
Yeah.
Another team that is kind of in a similar boat to Louisville is North Carolina. Louisville faces them on Wednesday, January 1st at 6 p.m. Eastern time. You can catch it on ACC Network or CW?
I
ACC
I
Network, I
haven't even.
believe.
I can't believe they'd put us on the CW playing North Carolina, but I would not put anything past the ACC
Yeah,
at this
I'm
point.
pretty sure it's ACC Network, but North Carolina in a very similar boat, very similar structure. ACC Network, we're getting the confirmation from the booth. Um, North Carolina, they feel very similar in a very similar spot to Louisville, right? Like they have a couple of really, really good guards. They don't have a true big. They've played a lot of really good teams and pretty much lost to all of them, save UCLA. They have a couple of quad one/quad two victories under their belt. Um, so very similar resume to Louisville. Uh, I mean, initial thoughts on North Carolina. I'll just kind of throw that in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think they're kind of an odd team to break down because they haven't really beaten anyone. I mean, they beat UCLA by two at a neutral site. So that's good. They've only won one game on the road. It was at Hawaii. Their second best win is at home against Dayton by two. And they've got five losses to number 7 Kansas, number 2 Auburn, number 18 Michigan State, number 5 Alabama, number 6 Florida. So you're right. They do look a lot like us. They're so guard dominant, and it's weird because traditionally you think of North Carolina and they've got a big man that you hate, that you just absolutely despise, and you're like, how does he still have another year? Is he not? Is he a sixth year? Is he getting his master's? It felt like that was always the case with North Carolina. But this team is guard dominated. It is RJ Davis, it is Seth Trimble, it is Ian Jackson, it is Elliot Cadeau. All four guys, 6'4" and shorter, all guards. Really, like, I don't surprisingly with how many guards they have, not a ton of assists. Like RJ Davis averages 3.9, which is solid, but Ian Jackson, not a great facilitator. Seth Trimble, not a great facilitator. Elliot Cadeau, really good facilitator. But like in the half court, when I watch this team, they're really not that great. Where they thrive is transition. You cannot let this team get out in transition. They score 16.2 points in the fast break. That's top 20 in the nation. I just recently rewatched the Alabama game that they played. I think they lost by like 12 or 15. But like when they hit their spurts, when they started to get back in the game with steals, layups, long misses, layups, like in transition, that is the way this team will kill you. And we saw Kentucky kill us that way. So that does certainly concern me a little bit. But I think if you keep this team in the half court, they're not going to kill us inside. They don't have any bigs that I'm afraid of whatsoever, unless Jalen Withers just decides to drop 20 on us for old time's sakes. And most of their guards are low efficiency shooters. Like Elliot Cadeau's a terrible shooter. RJ Davis loves to shoot the ball and doesn't shoot it well. Their other two guards, Ian Jackson, Seth Trimble, shoot it better. Ian Jackson's a 42% 3-point shooter, and Seth Trimble's like high 30s 3-point shooter. So they're a little bit better shooters, but all in all, the half court doesn't scare me. It's the transition, it's the speed of this team that scares me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, sixth fastest pace in the country. That says a lot about them right there. Defensively, average possession length is about average, but they don't turn the ball over a ton, and they don't turn you over a ton. Defensively, they are 59th, according to KenPom, 17th offensively. Jake, I'll go to you on this in a second, but to me, I think this game comes down to, how does Louisville stop the penetration of their guards? I mean, that is a huge component of this game. Is maybe you can have Chucky Hepburn lock down RJ Davis, but then who's taking Elliot Cadeau? Who's locking down Seth Trimble? Like, that's to me, that's the story of the game. Is how does Louisville match that? Because they have 1.5, 2 guards, right? Like a guard in a traditional sense. Like, is Elliot Cadeau going to be matching up with Brain Smith all night?
Most likely.
Is Javon Hadley tasked with Elliot Cadeau or with, what does this look like? Like, how do you defend this team? Do you throw like zone elements into it? Do you pressure up top? Are you going over every screen and switching everything? Like, what does that look like? Like, how do you stop this team when you're a team that's built like Louisville, where it seems like, you don't have a ton to match up with them?
Yeah, RJ Davis, I think logically gets guarded by Chucky. I think I'd probably put Rain on Elliot Cadeau because he's a facilitator. He's not a scorer. He's not going to blow past you or just hit crazy step back threes on you, anything like that. Seth Trimble, Ian Jackson, Terrence Edwards, Javon Hadley, those kind of guys. I think the biggest thing is if we do end up switching on screens, what can Noah Waterman do? What can James Scott do when they're tasked with guarding Ian Jackson or Seth Trimble on the perimeter? Because as we've seen, not good, not typically good. So it's a huge concern. I think the other thing we have to do is we have to present some semblance of help side defense in the interior because these guards are going to get past you. Like, they've got 4 quality on-ball guards that can get past people. You're not going to play perfect defense for 30 seconds every possession. Like, they're going to get past you. They're going to get in the paint. Is Kanai, is James Scott, is Noah Waterman in the right spot in that help side slot? Because their bigs aren't that great. Like, unless they're throwing a lob and catching and dunking it, I'm not really worried about them. Like, I want excess help defense. I want them to be very aware of where that driver is coming from. Because to me, unless it's Elliot Cadeau, I know Seth Trimble, who averages 1.7 assists. I know Ian Jackson, who averages 0.7 assists. Like, those dudes want to shoot. They don't want to pass the ball. So I want more interior help defense. So I think that's the way you beat them, because you know that you're going to eventually get beat by these guards. It's going to have to be a full onslaught of team defense, especially from the bigs.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a team that, maybe you just kind of have to take what you get from them on the perimeter and kind of just keep them out of the paint as much as possible. Like, we saw that royally bite Louisville in the ass by them just kind of sagging off at Kentucky's point guard and him just literally not missing a shot. But that was strategically, that's what the game plan dictates.
Are we talking about the career 32% 3-point shooter? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That guy. Okay. Yeah. 8 for 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Still
So
not over it.
yeah, clearly we're still healing there. But I mean, RJ Davis, 27%, 28% from three this year.
Hmm.
Elliot Cadeau has made 9 threes all season. He's 25% from beyond the arc. Obviously, Ian Jackson is their best 3-point shooter. So, whoever's assigned to Ian Jackson, who's closing out on him. Seth Trimble, 15 for 39, 38.5% from three on the season. And then Jalen Withers, 7 for 23. Not a bunch else out there. It'll be interesting to see, what Louisville does to kind of negate them as an outside threat. But I think that you take North Carolina settling for contested or out of rhythm threes all day over letting them get into the paint.
Hmm.
Just my personal opinion there. On the offensive end, to me, I think that this is a game where you want to see Louisville make this more of a half court game and then just not turn the ball over.
Hmm.
I mean, what was it against Kentucky? They had one turnover in the first half, right?
Hmm.
You got to see a performance like that for them to stay in this game. I mean, any disagreement there? Like, how do you approach this game from the offensive side?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I rewatched the Alabama game, and it's like I said, when they turn the ball over, when they miss deep threes that go for long rebounds, that's where North Carolina is going to kill you. So limiting transition looks, limiting those turnovers. They're really bad at defending three. They're like 286 in the nation. Teams shoot 36% from three. They help out a lot. They're really aggressive. So if you can get into the paint, you'll have a kick out for an open three. So, but unfortunately, we have like two guys right now that can really do that. So I don't know how effective that'll be. They're really aggressive on the defensive end, especially on the perimeter, which in the past worked for them because they had a great shot blocker. Why am I drawing a blank on the ugly dude's name last year? What is his name? The center for North Carolina last year?
Bacot, Armando Bacot.
Armando Baycott. Thank you, Jesus Christ. Yeah, they don't have
Mhm.
Armando Baycott for the first time in 8 years. And in this center, it's very nice. So like they're pressuring so heavily on the ball. If you can get past them, they're helping so much. You can kick, or you can just finish the lane because they don't have a guy that averages more than a block per game. Like they don't have a super intense defensive presence on the inside. So I think that just getting into the paint is the biggest thing to kick out for threes or to just finish at the rim. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for Louisville on offense.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when you talk storylines of this game, I think that it comes down to is Louisville hitting or not hitting their threes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Every game.
think that I mean, yeah, that could be an evergreen statement, right? Like Louisville takes a lot of threes. If they make a lot of threes, they will win. If they do not, they will lose. If it's somewhere in between, then it's gonna be a really close game.
Mm-hmm.
And against Eastern Kentucky, second half went completely cold. Just had to kind of hang on. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there something that Louisville can do better to be shooting better shots? You know, like where do you go from here? Is there just something where they just need to see shots go down more consistently? Like that's kind of what befuddles me at this point. It's like either they're hot or they're not. It doesn't seem like there's a real, line to draw where it's like if they do X correctly, then they shoot better. It's just some nights the ball's moving really well and they're making all the shots. Other nights the ball's still moving pretty well. They're still getting open shots and they're just not falling. I mean, anything that you're seeing that is leading to that.
I mean, I will say I think we've talked about all these guys are regressing as 3-point shooters, except for Rain. Rain's about where he's a little bit under it, but for the most part, he's still a 36, 37% 3-point shooter. I think he was like career 38, 39.
Is a little bit down under.
Mm-hmm.
No, okay. Anyways,
That was bad. I'm sorry. I didn't even catch it. I'm so sorry. It was so bad. It went right over my head. But outside of Rain, these guys are not used to taking these types of threes. Like if you watch Javon Hadley when he was at Colorado, I think he averaged like 1.2 3-point attempts per game. They were butt naked, wide open threes. Like it was offensive rebound. He's just sitting in the corner, gets it wide open. Like the types of threes that Noah Waterman and Javon Hadley and outside of Rain Smith, even Chucky, like these guys are just not used to shooting like these kinds of threes. Like they're open, but they're almost like NBA open. if that makes sense, where like you've got confidence in an NBA shooter to shoot that because the hand's late coming up. And so I think that might be the thing, is just like, if at some point these guys aren't shooting as well as you are hoping they're shooting because they're not shooting as open of threes as they're traditionally used to. And especially with a guy like Javon, I feel like I'll watch him, and if he hits his first three, he's going to pull that second one confidently. And if he misses that one, he'll pull that third one confidently. But then if he misses that fourth one, he's nothing out on the perimeter. Like he's not going to shoot another one, and he just gets it, and he doesn't look to attack the basket. He looks to just pass to somebody else or put his back to the basket. So now for those guys that are struggling, like Kanai, Javon, shooting right now, it's just be in a more attack position, maybe attack the basket as opposed to looking for that 3-point shot immediately. So I don't know. I still want them to shoot threes. I think they're good looks. They're not great looks like they might traditionally be used to, but they are good enough looks that I still believe they should shoot them. Besides maybe Kanai. Kanai maybe he's came back down to earth quite a lot. I love his aggressiveness, but he could stand to learn to pass a little bit more and understand the situation that he is in. But he's a freshman.
Yeah. I mean, if we take at face value what James Scott and Kanai Roos are at this point, I think offensively you have to get more out of them. And so I think that, maybe not as much Scott, but definitely Hadley, and maybe a little bit Kanai Roos as well. You have to see them, maybe trying to play a little bit more back to the basket, maybe getting a little bit more aggressive as drivers to the basket. We saw Javon Hadley do that quite a few times, probably 3 or 4 times against Eastern Kentucky, where he was just like an absolute dog. Went up against a bigger player, got an and one, made a tough bucket, made a hook shot, up and under. Like he was kind of in his bag against EKU offensively in a sense. And against a team like North Carolina, I could see him matching up really well there, where he could be kind of more of a threat in the post. And so that's what I'd like to see Kanai Roos take a little bit more of an initiative as well, because he is very skilled, very rangy, very long, very athletic, probably the most athletic player on this team. And so I'd like to see him kind of start developing more as a guy on the inside, rather than, somebody who is a slasher or a driver, or, only scores in opportunities where he has like a kind of a breakaway dunk or a lane to drive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see him be a little bit more of a creator. And I think if you can get more out of them in that facet, then really, Chucky, who's probably been your most consistent 3-point shooter, especially when it matters the most. You have Chucky, Rain, and in a sense, Waterman, that can be kind of more of your 3-point shooters. And I think that that's kind of a recipe for success there. But in my opinion, I think North Carolina is a great place to start with that, especially trying to get some of these players that are more of guards or forwards to, try to get into the paint just a little bit more. I think it could just create a lot more opportunities for them as an offense. And then, continue crashing the offensive boards as well. If you're not going to be a team that's going to create those extra possessions by forcing a lot of turnovers like you were early in the season, they become a team that's going to get extra possessions out of getting offensive rebounds. We've seen that increasing over the last probably 3 or 4 games. I'd like to continue to see there be assertiveness on the offensive boards. Um, you know, it really depends on how opportunistic they can be against North Carolina, because, like we said, that's a team that wants to get boards and get out in transition really quickly.
Yeah. To your point, I was going to say one more thing, looking at that with and without Kaysen thing. Another thing that stood out with the lack of forcing turnovers and I guess less rebounding defensively. When we had Kaysen, we were averaging about 6 more shots attempted per game than the opponent we faced, which just naturally, no matter who you're playing against, if you're able to shoot 6 more times, that's an opportunity to score 5, 10, 15, 20 more points. Now we're actually dead even. Like we've shot 355 field goal attempts. Our opponents have shot 356. So like we're losing on average 6 extra possessions, or at least field goal attempts per game with this new non-Kaysen Pryor. style of play. So you're right. The offensive glass is going to be huge because we're not turning teams over like we had been, and we're not going to turn this North Carolina team over. They've got too much solid guard play to expect more than. I mean, if you get 12 turnovers on them, I think you're probably pretty thrilled because they don't turn the ball over much at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, North Carolina does not take a bunch of chances offensively or defensively. Like they're not jumping a bunch of passing lanes. They're not super aggressive, especially on the defensive end. What they do what they do really well, which is get out on the break, create transition buckets, score, and create opportunities by getting buckets out of non-set plays. When you can
Mm-hmm.
get them into kind of a back and forth, slow down, methodical type of game, they tend to struggle a little bit. So, to me, if we're talking keys to the game against North Carolina, to me, number one, hit your shots. I mean, that's could be number one every week. And then number two is simply just slowing the game down and dictating the pace and not turning the ball over. So really, I guess you could make that 2 and 3 is dictating the pace of the game and then not turning it over. What about you?
Mm-hmm.
Keys to the game here?
Offensively, get into the paint, whether it's a post touch with Javon Hadley, it's Chucky getting into the paint driving, Terrence getting into the paint driving. We have to be able to collapse this defense and force help or be able to finish at the basket. On the defensive side of things, sit back a little bit. Let them shoot. They are not a good shooting team. 31.9% from three. So let them shoot. Don't allow their guards just blow past you and get easy layups because they're able to do that. It's the ability to be able to shoot threes and make threes consistently. And don't be afraid to help off because most of these guys are not great shooters. Help off of Elliot Cadeau, help off of RJ Davis, help off of not good Lord, Jalen Withers, help off of
Mm-hmm.
those guys. So I think it's a lot of helping and sagging. I think will benefit this defense a lot.
Yeah, last thing that I think will be a huge deciding factor in this game is the coaches on the sidelines. Hubert Davis versus Pat Kelsey. Because Pat Kelsey, as far as set plays, out of timeouts, out of dead balls, um, Louisville could not have been any better against Kentucky. And if you have that against North Carolina, who I just don't think is as quality of a team, that's huge. So I think that's something to look out for and could be a huge difference maker. As we're going into predictions and getting out of here, Jake, I think that my final thought is that this is the most important game of the season. If you talk to the coaching staff, they'll say, of course, and the next game is the most important game after that. But the reality is that our friend Chris Hatfield put this on Twitter, and I thought this is the stat of the week. If you give Louisville a win against North Carolina, and the rest of the schedule just goes as projected, Louisville is projected as a first four by team by Bart Torvik. With a loss and the same parameters, Louisville is a second team out of the tournament.
Okay.
So this is a huge swing game according to the statistics, right? According to the probabilities, but based on the way that the projections think Louisville would ultimately land. This game is predicted as a heading into the Eastern Kentucky game. It was a 1-point win according to Ken Palm. Now it's a 1-point loss. So again, projected by all metrics to be very close. And this is a game that would be huge for Louisville or North Carolina. Louisville only has 2 or 3 more quad one opportunities after this game. So huge, momentum shifting, season shifting, career defining game for Pat Kelsey and for Louisville. What do you think ultimately happens?
I think they're right. I think it will be a close game. God, it's so hard to predict with this team because it is most likely just going to come down to do we shoot 28% from three or do we shoot 38 or somewhere in between? Because like you said, if we shoot 28, we're losing. If we shoot 38, we're probably winning by 15 or more. If we shoot in between 32 and 35, it's going to be a good game. I ultimately am not super impressed with this North Carolina team. I think they have a lot of talent, particularly with the guards, but I don't think they're a great cohesive unit, particularly on the half court offensive side of things. And I think hopefully Louisville can take advantage of that, return to that defensive presence that we had seen prior to the case and prior injury. So I'm going to take Louisville. I'll say 79-74 Louisville wins.
Okay, I like that. I like that. I texted Jacob as well just to get his thoughts. He says he thinks Louisville loses by 8 to 10 plus. He said North Carolina has 3 dynamic guards who can give you all sorts of fits. They have no true big man, but they have a ton of bodies down there. Washington Withers, Ben Lubin, Tyson Brown, etc. So he thinks, they have more bodies down low that can wear out Louisville's bigs, and they are just more talented and deep at the guard position as well. And that's going to be difficult to stop. My response to that would be just like Coach Lieb said in the offseason, Louisville is also difficult to stop. Louisville is a team that is difficult to match up with. And just because you've lost a couple of players, that doesn't change that. So from Louisville's perspective, I think, it's like we said, you shoot 36, 37+% from 3, you have a really good chance of winning against almost anybody. Still the case here. I do think that Louisville wins in a close one. I'm going to go 83-81. I think it's going to be something where you see Louisville's up 10, 12 points with 4 or 5 minutes left. North Carolina might hit some shots. They have some veteran players that can hit some shots down the stretch, and Louisville has to pull it out at the free throw line in the end. So I'll go 83-81. What was yours again? 70?
79-74, I believe.
Yeah. And I think that's right where all the metrics would indicate that it would be as well. Obviously one other thing before we get out of here, how is this game called? I think any game where there are less fouls called favors Louisville. I mean, if you get into a free throw contest and it turns into, you're sitting Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards or James Scott for extended periods of time, that's when games will start to get away from you. So that's one other thing to look at as well, is just, how tightly is this game called, and can Louisville take advantage of the way that the game's called. But ultimately, I think that Louisville pulls this out because I just think that it's such a crucial moment in Pat Kelsey's tenure. I think this can be kind of a staple win, getting a win, over a big name, big brand team, 29th in Ken Palm, firmly inside the tournament at this point. A team where a win where you could solidify yourself as at least a single bye, and hoping for a double bye in the ACC tournament. I think that's the type of performance you're looking for. But Jake, it's been fun. Make sure you follow us on the X at @UVille_updates, at Pres Meyer, at Starting 502, at Romy Bean, at Jacob Lane 08. At State of Lou. We have way too many Twitters, but if you follow any of those, make sure you follow the State of Lou, of course. Jake, until next time, let's get out of here. Go Cards. Drink your Mr. and Mrs.
Go Cards.